Hello again, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Threading the Needle Tuesday, and here's why. Paul Bruton standing by. Paul Bruton standing by. He had run for alderman in the 13th Ward in the far southwest side of Chicago. And I said this to I was just saying this to someone yesterday. I was saying, you know what? As I age, as time moves on, time waits for no one, and it will not wait for me. Sorry, Mick Jagger. As time moves on and advances, I've come to realize that in some ways, when it comes to Chicagoans, the more interesting political observers are the candidates who did not win. I know what you're thinking, folks. Whoa, my mind is blown. I know you all like when you have like an elected official. I want to hear what the elected official says. And usually they talk in circles. They don't have anything to say. They're so afraid of saying the wrong thing. They don't say anything at all. You know, they have many constituents when you're elected. Well, you know, you have your constituents that elected you. They care about, you know, I don't know if they're paying attention, like taxes and streets and services, etc. So, but then you also have your political bosses. You know, the rulers. If let's say you're a state rep, the rulers of the state house. If you're an alderman, the ruler of your coalition. You know, so like if you're Raylo, no, I'll pick a Marty Quinn. Let's say I just pick Marty Quinn's name out of the hat. Marty Quinn, 13th Ward alderman. You got to worry. You got to get Raylo upset. You know, you guys are all in a coalition together. Are you going to get Anthony Beale upset? Who's the brains behind the anti-Johnson coalition? So you don't want to get him upset. So in other words, you have a lot of different people you have to kind of pay attention to. But when you don't win, you're free. You're liberated. You can say whatever you want, including insights on how political machines operate in the city of Chicago. And Paul has a few thoughts to say about that. But before I bring him on, even after that opening oration, just about him, I have to say I had a laugh out of this one. Two stories broke at the same time today. One, and I'll get into this one in what a week, you know, with Dr. D. But one was Darren Bailey, the Republican candidate for governor. He's trying a new approach to politics this time. He's not going to be like Trump. He's not going to just alienate a good chunk of the voters, realizing that that's what his base wants. You know why he's not going to do that? Because his base isn't big enough to get him elected. Duh. Donnie can alienate every Democrat in the country because he realizes that thanks to our electoral college, his base is big enough of MAGA types is big enough to get him elected president. It's a reality. So he could just say what he wants about anybody, disagree, disparage whole cities, disparage whole ethnic groups. We could go down a whole line. He could disparage ex-presidents like Barack Obama. He could disparage the Pope. Do whatever he wants. It's got a cult that controls, like, I don't know, whatever chunk of the electoral vote there is that they control. The rest is you know, swing. Whoa, which way is the wind blowing? I don't know. The price of eggs concerns me. So as a result, Donnie can say what he wants, but Darren Bailey, running statewide in the state of Illinois, came to the conclusion in 2022, I can't just pull a Donnie. I just can't insult everybody who's in opposition. I can't insult every Democrat. And most of the point, I can't describe Chicago as a hellhole, as though it's a god-awful place that's sort of like an apocalyptic version of the worst nightmare MAGA has about Chicago, particularly it's just like white people have about Chicago, if I may. So as a result, he's in this campaign as he runs against J.B. Pritzker, he's inching away from his Trumpian instincts and is trying to play nice with Chicago. And as such, he released a commercial today in which he's sorry, it's such a dumb commercial. I apologize, Paul. It's a commercial in which he gets together with his running mate, a gentleman named Aaron Damar, and Aaron leads him through. Aaron, who's from Palatine, which is a suburb of Chicago, that I guess apparently makes him an expert on Chicago. See what Paul Bruton thinks about that. Are we going to suddenly allow people in like Westchester? I'll just pick Westchester as a suburb. It's out of nowhere, Paul. Why did I pick Westchester? I don't know. Are we going to allow people in Westchester to dictate to us what Chicago represents? So, of course, you know what they said, folks. It's so predictable. The commercial was probably written by AI. You can guess. One, they talked about eating a hot dog and how you must not put ketchup on a hot dog. God damn. Please, Chicago, just put the ketchup on the hot dog. No one cares. God, the stupid thing. And two, he took him to have some deep dish pizza. And Darren Bailey as acting like, wow, this is so good. Oh, I was so wrong to call Chicago a hellhole. And then they show Navy Pier like they're walking in front of Navy Pier. Oh my God. I believe that commercial. I believe AI. I believe a robot created that commercial. And Darren, I don't know, DB. I like the old DB. The old, I hate Chicago DB. The old Chicago's a hellhole DB. I remember when DB came up, Darren Bailey, he had a rally. I think it was against COVID masks at Buckingham Fountain. He denounced everybody in Chicago. And they asked them, they go, well, how can you expect any votes in Chicago denouncing everybody? He goes, you have to treat Chicagoans like they're your kids. And when they're doing wrong, you got to spank them. I guess Darren, someone must have gotten to DB. Some robot got to DB. Anyway, folks, if you want some entertainment, go watch the commercial. I'm sure Dr. D and I will play it on Friday or what a week because it is a stitch. He's trying to walk a very thin line, a very narrow line. He's trying to keep that MAGA base together, which is the heart and soul of his campaign, while picking up just enough swing votes in towns like Palatine, and Wheeling, and on the Southwest side where Paul Bruton's from. Well, he did pretty well on the Southwest side where Paul Bruton's from in 2022. And so that's really part of his base, which just gets into the whole story of Paul decided he was going to run in the middle of MAGA country. Anyway, funny stuff from Darren Bailey. Darren, I wish you'd just go back to the 2022, Darren, all right? Forget the Mr. Nice Guy, Darren Bailey. And you know what? Put the ketchup on the pizza next time. Forget that. Just put it on just do whatever you want to do. I'm going to put this ketchup on my pizza and my hot dog. I'm going to put my hot dog in my pizza. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring on the great Paul Bruton. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. I didn't mean to disparage in any way the 13th Ward on the southwest side of Chicago. In my comments, I humbly apologize to anybody who lives in the 13th Ward who's listening, who took offense at anything I might have said. But you guys in the 13th Ward, good God. You guys are so, what's the word? Schizophrenic, Paul. Feel free to defend the 13th Ward.
I will defend. The only thing I'll say is
Yes.
we were talking the other day, and
Yeah.
you were asking about sort of left versus right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the challenging things about the 13th Ward and some of the surrounding areas is that it doesn't fit neatly into kind of the traditional definitions of left versus right, because you've got very strong labor unions. You've got people who are in unions. They have very strong opinions about labor and collective action in that way. But at the same time, there are some much more conservative viewpoints that kind of get welded to that. And so it doesn't always fit super neatly into the sort of usual left-right binary there.
Well, I would put it to you this way.
Yeah.
There is a binary there. This is a fascinating discussion in and of itself, and you started us going on this path. But I would just say that the Democrats who ruled the 13th Ward, that was Michael. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was Michael Joseph Madigan.
Here we got the crash course, right? Here you go.
We have the crash course. And so let's get to the go. I started by saying, more as I get older, I prefer candidates who lost. Paul Bruton had the audacity to run against Marty Quinn. And this is what you need to know about Marty Quinn, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to let Paul fill in the gaps, but you need to know this. He was Michael Joseph Madigan's key political hatchet man. I don't know what else to call operative. He was the guy dispatched. I'm not making this up, people. You can look it up. He was an alderman from the 13th Ward. He is an alderman of the 13th Ward. At the same time, he was Michael Madigan's one of his key operatives, and Madigan would dispatch him. His second job, he had two jobs, one alderman, two as a freelancer. He would be sent to various state rep seats, and he would run a very traditional Madigan-esque campaign denouncing whatever Republican was running against whatever Democratic ally of Madigan was on the ballot. And he did this in all kinds of districts, black districts, white districts, Hispanic districts. He was quite good. Madigan trusted him, loved him. He had 2 full-time jobs, people. That's a full-time job in and of itself. He was also the alderman of the 13th Ward. And he bowed down to Michael Joseph Madigan, an all-powerful machine. Michael Joseph, if you know, was convicted of corruption charges, and I now believe he's still in the federal pen. And Michael Quinn and Marty Quinn has undergone a transformation, which is just only in Chicago. He's now become a quote-unquote independent, standing up to Mayor Brandon Johnson and powerful bosses. Yes, that's his rhetoric now. I'm defying a powerful boss. Dude, you are the operative for the most powerful boss. All right, that's Marty Quinn. He's been the alderman of the 13th Ward, Michael Joseph Madigan's beloved ward. Paul Bruton, I will now allow Paul to tell the rest of the story, had the audacity, and I love him for this, to run against Marty Quinn. When was it, 2023? Yes, 2023. Yeah. All right, Paul, the floor is yours to pick up. I set it up. Now take it away. Why you ran, where the 13th Ward is, who you are, and what you discovered. Go.
Okay, so the 13th Ward, which is on the southwest side of Chicago, is, as of now, the current boundaries, is basically immediately to the west of Midway Airport and immediately to the east of Midway Airport, right? It's just a great big rectangle. If you look at a map of Chicago, the little bit on the southwest side, that rectangle that sort of juts out, that's the 13th Ward now. So this is long been a part of the Chicago machine. The 13th Ward, you can go back decades, right? And the 13th Ward has been a really vital part of going back to even, I mean, really as far as Old Man Daly, even older than that, I would say, that the 13th Ward has been, instrumental in that whole operation. So as the machine has shrunk over the last, let's say, I don't know, what's like 20 years, maybe 30 years, what remains in the 13th Ward is kind of one of the vestiges of that much larger Chicago machine, right? So in March of 2022, so I had considered possibly running for office someday for a long time. And then in March of 2022, the Madigan indictment came down. So this was in the spring, and that was at the time, I think it was 22 or 23 counts of various corruption charges. And for me, I grew up in the area. I live out here now with my wife and kids. And I've long been very frustrated about the fact that often when you go to vote, there are no choices on the ballot. It's largely unopposed races, right? Mm-hmm. I have filled out ballots before where Mike Madigan's name is on the ballot. I just leave it blank, right? Or I'll write somebody in or whatever. Like, you don't have a choice. He's going to win, right? So there's been races like that in the past. So that's always been a frustration of mine. So this indictment comes down, and I was like, this is really outrageous, and this is all part of this 13th Ward organization, because in the Madigan indictment, the DOJ named the 13th Ward Democratic Organization specifically as part of what they called the Madigan Enterprise, right? And they were, at the time, I believe there was a racketeering charge involved, which I don't think was ultimately part of the conviction. I think it either got dropped or they didn't convict him on it. But in black and white, right, the DOJ was laying out this idea that you have this organization that is involved in these corrupt practices. And so I thought, well, somebody should run against these guys, right? And then I thought, well, maybe I should run against these guys. And so I started talking about it with friends and family over like the summer of 2022. And by the fall, I was ready to jump in. Now, one of the things that I should mention is there had been a guy who ran in 2019. So this young guy, David Krupa, ran. He was a Republican, ran in 2019 against Marty Quinn. And that was really notable because, like I said, usually these are unopposed races. So David Krupa had gotten in. He was, I think, 19 at the time. And he wasn't considered a super viable candidate, but the machine kind of went after him anyway. They really tried to tear him apart. And it got him a decent amount of press. And it was kind of an unusual dynamic because, you know, you would think you wouldn't want to call attention necessarily to the opponent. But I think, like you're talking about, there is this MO about this is how you run a competitive race, right? You go after them. And so he ran. He obviously didn't win. I think he did get 10 or 15% of the vote. But it wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything, but the fact that he got on the ballot was really notable, because the way a lot of these races end up working is you get the signatures, you have to go through a process to get on the ballot, and the organization will challenge you on that, right? They will make you go through a whole process to try to bounce you off the ballot, because it's much cheaper and easier to not run a race than it is to have to run a race, right? So anyway, so in 2022, I decided to run, and I kind of kept it a little quiet before I actually got out there and started collecting signatures, which happens right around Labor Day is when you can start doing it. And the idea was, I got some friends and family together, and I wanted to, you need just shy of 500 signatures. I think it changes cycle to cycle, but in 2022, the election was in 23, but this is in 22. You needed 473 signatures. I remember very clearly. And you have to get them. You have to get the signature. You have to get registered voters to sign a petition. You have to get those signatures notarized. And you have to get them notarized before the other guy gets the signature and gets it notarized. Because if they can prove they got the signature before you, then they can say, well, that's not his signature, that's my signature, and that one doesn't count for him, right? Yeah. So the recommendation, you'll hear sort of political folks in Chicago say, is that you want to get at least 3 times more signatures than you actually need in order to be sure you're on the ballot. So you have to get 473, but let's call it 500. 3 times that, you need 1,500 signatures, right? So it's a lot. It's a lot of work, right? So the goal was to get out there and kind of, before anybody knew I was running, try to get at least those 500 signatures, right, in like the first couple of days. So we went out and did a weekend and kind of hit it hard. And I don't remember exactly how many, but we had several hundred by the end of the first weekend. I think we had 200 or 300. And by the end of the first week, we had the 500. And then we just kept plugging away, right, trying to get as many signatures as we could. So I did make it on the ballot ultimately, but it's a tricky process. It's a lot of legwork to get out there and knock on doors and talk to people and get the signatures.
Did they challenge you? Did Quinn's people challenge you?
They did not challenge me, and I think there are 2 reasons they didn't challenge me. Oh, really, 3 reasons. The first reason is I did in the end, I had a little over 1,500 signatures. Okay. So I had way more than I needed. I also did have an election attorney that I had hired, which is, I'll say this, right? So one of the questions before I got into this was, why don't more people run? Right. And I'll tell you, one of the big reasons more people don't run is the sort of entry fee just to get in this and be involved. You really need an election attorney. Because there are questions that come up, and if there are challenges, you need somebody to navigate all that. And right out of the gate, you're looking at like a $4,000 or $5,000 retainer for an attorney, right? And that's up front, and that gets you a lot of, you can call them up and they'll answer you whenever you want because you've already paid them. But you have to do that right out of the gate. Now, if you're a sitting alderman, or you're, a sitting state rep or whatever it is, you've got somebody already, right? You've got that. That's not part of the buy into this thing. You have somebody that maybe they're part of the organization, or maybe, so before you even do anything, you got to pony up a couple $1,000s just to be in the race, right? Yeah. And there are ways you could try to do it without an attorney. And I know there are people who have done that, right? It's possible, but it's a lot harder. And so I think the fact that I had an attorney, the fact that I had a lot of signatures, and then the third reason I say is that they, at some point in the process, I don't know exactly when, my read is that the organization decided that the best strategy to deal with me was to just totally ignore me. They had not done it 4 years earlier with David Krupa, and that had kind of bit them a little bit. I think they had to spend more money, because once you raise the profile of an opponent, you got to invest in then messaging and things. as far as I know, there were no negative mailers against me. There were no ads against me. I think they tried not to mention my name if they could possibly help it. And it was very difficult to get any kind of media attention. That I think, and I have a couple of thoughts about why that might have been, but I think it was just a very difficult environment at that moment to get press, particularly around what was seen, rightfully so, as a long shot bid, right?
Yeah. Well, also, think about this. So the kid Krupa, who ran in 2019, I remember this. He was kind of coming at it from the right.
Yeah. No, he effectively was the 13th Ward Republican Party.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So this gets into the psyche of Southwest Siders to a certain degree. And so the Southwest Side is almost exclusively, correct me if I'm wrong, Democratic elected officials, but the voting base itself is quite conservative and is generally, there's precincts, I don't know, it's in the 13th Ward, but definitely in the 23rd Ward and the 19th Ward that are Trump's and DB, Darren Bailey, the aforementioned Darren Bailey. That's their highest vote total. In the state's attorney's race, when Republicans run, that's their highest vote total. Brendan Riley, I bet, even when it comes to a Democratic primary, the conservative Democrat, Brendan Riley probably did very well relative to the rest of the city. Got throttled by Tony Preckwinkle, but he probably did well in precincts. So it's very bizarre area where they lean. It's hard to figure out how exactly they lean into that left-right dynamic that you were talking, that binary thing, because while they are conservative and will vote conservative in national elections and are conservative on issues like abortion, et cetera, and so forth, it's the bastion of the Democratic machine. It's where Michael Joseph Madigan's built his machine. Before him, Billy Lipinski's way before your time. But there were other machine guys down there, all of whom hated me. Sorry, I didn't mean to go down. And so I always thought it was so weird. But think about this. The kid, Krupa, was running. So Republicans could use Krupa as an instrument to denounce Michael Madigan. Republicans loved. They had decided that Madigan was going to be the boogeyman.
Yeah.
So they were all, I remember Johnny Cass, everybody was, all the MAGA types in the Chicago media were pushing this kid Krupa. He's 19 years old. Half the voters thought he was Gene Krupa. No, different Krupa. And but when you're coming around in 2023, Michael Joseph Madigan has kind of left the scene.
Yeah.
Marty Quinn is beginning to make that shift to become kind of a MAGA alderman himself. So the whole, what am I saying? The image of this area, like it's more of an out and out MAGA area.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. I think it is definitely in the city of Chicago. It's definitely one of the higher, like you said, there's precincts that I think did go majority Trump in a couple of elections. I do think the 13th Ward as a whole was still votes majority Democrat, even in those national races. But in individual precincts, you're right. I think there are some where it's over 50%, right? And like I said, it's a little bit tricky because there are definitely stances. Like, I'll give you an example. When I was running in 23, right? We were right in the midst of Venezuelan migrants coming to Chicago, right? That was one of the things that was happening at that time. And so that was a question I got a lot, was about what are you going to do about this? What's your position on this? And people were very concerned about illegal immigration, right? And I was having to go and say, well, hold on, let's stop for a second, because what you have here are people from Venezuela who are asylum seekers. They're not illegal immigrants, right? They have come to a port of entry. They have applied for asylum. They have pending court cases, right? These are not, by definition, these are not illegal immigrants. These are not people who are sneaking in, right? They are coming through a channel. We have a process for this, and they're in that process. And there were people who were sympathetic to that, who'd go, oh yeah, that's a fair point. And there were other people who just were not, that was not a distinction they cared about, right? That as far as they were concerned, this all falls under the header of illegal immigration, right? And that kind of nuance to that conversation. So it's tricky because you know, if you talk to people in this area, it's a very it is, I think anymore it's about 50% white, 50% Hispanic. But it is a lot of children and grandchildren and great grandchildren of immigrants from various places, from Ireland, from Italy, from Mexico, from Poland. There's a lot of Polish families in the neighborhood, and so it's immigration is kind of a funny like issue, because if you really push people on it, they will agree. Oh, of course we like immigrants. I'm you know, my family, we're immigrants, but we want it to be done the right way, right? That's always the rhetoric, right? And then if you try to say, well, these people are doing it the right way, this is the process as defined, you start to see who really believes that element and who's just doesn't want immigrants, period. But that was a big hot button issue. And the other one at the time was the Safety Act, which was the particularly the end of cash bail, right? That was you were talking about Darren Bailey earlier. Darren Bailey. So because of Chicago's strange election schedule, right? The governor's race was happening in 2022. So I'm going door to door in the fall of 22, trying to get on the ballot for the municipal election, which is in spring of 23. Right. But you're going door to door. It's a couple weeks before the fall election, and people are like, what are you running for? What are you doing here? What like, and it's like, no, not that election, the other election, the next one that's coming up. And people really wanted to talk about the Safety Act. And again, I would start with, okay, I'm running for city council, which is not going to vote on this. This is a state law. But then they still want to know what you think about it, right? And particularly the cash bail portion of it was really contentious. And I think a lot of that was because Darren Bailey was really hitting that messaging hard. He was sending out those newspapers, you know, that were not real newspapers, that looked like, and that were really just all the messaging was about how terrible this bill was. And, you know, I had people that was their one issue. That's all they cared about was, what do you think about this? And if I said, well, I think it's a good idea, that slammed the door in your face, right? That was the end of the conversation. But what was interesting was, if you could get people in a room, and I did this a handful of times, I did a bunch of town hall meetings at like libraries and parks and stuff. You can just rent the room and you can hold an event. So I did this a few times, probably 10 or 12 times around various places in the ward. And if you can sit people down and walk them through, okay, we have a system right now with cash bail where someone can buy their way out of jail, right? And we want a system where it's based on some kind of risk assessment rather than just letting somebody pay their way out. If you really walk them through those steps, a lot of people go, oh yeah, that's better. I like that better. Even people who are against it in the first place. Now, the problem is, how do you scale that to, you know, there's 10 or 12,000 voters who vote in the 13th ward. I would have these town hall meetings and you'd get like 8 people in the room, and maybe you can convince those 8 people, but that's not going to do it. Right. So I think it's, I guess all of this is to say I'm pushing back a little on the idea that like it's the heart of MAGA country. There's definitely some of that, but I think people are a little more, what would be the term, like sort of more politically fluid than that. There's a little more, well, maybe not quite open-minded. there's some open-mindedness, but I think there's people, if you can sit them down and walk them through it, right? There are some principles in play, and you can kind of convince people of some things. They're not really hardened into one team or the other in a lot of cases.
Well, I think a lot of people, now we're on a tangent, but I'm going to say this and you can fight back. I think a lot of people, this goes beyond the 13th ward, their view of the world is tailored to their likes and dislikes. So the concept behind cash bail is the concept that we're innocent until proven otherwise. There's an assumption of innocence, and that if you have cash bail, if you're broke, you're just going to be treated like you did the crime because you can't pay the bail. And so you're going to be stuck in jail, and you're going to be paying all the consequences of being stuck in jail, which could mean you lose your job. You can't go to work. Then you can't support your family, or you can't make child support family, or you can't pay the rent, or your kids can't have food, et cetera, and so forth, Paul. So that's the dynamic that drives that as an ideal issue. So if you ask red-blooded MAGA, what they feel about someone that they probably hate somewhere in the crevices of their soul, which are black people in the city of Chicago, they'll say, well, you know what? They're probably guilty of something. Now, and if you ask them on the other hand, well, what about Donnie and January 6th? That sure looked like they were guilty, don't you? What? Oh, no, you got to understand, Ben. We have a system of our country in our country where you're presumed innocent. You never heard about that? So remember every time Donnie was up for something, Paul? You remember all the different times that he was charged with things? It was always an aggressive, out of control prosecutor that was bent on picking on him, and his presumption of innocence was overlooked. So you see that contradiction? They want something, they claim something for Donnie, who they like, and they deny it for people they don't like or don't know or fear or what have you. And you're walking in and knocking on their door and saying, vote for me. And
Yeah.
it's kind of,
I mean, and there are definitely people, right? I was going around, and it's a little tricky, right? Because I was telling people I'm a Democrat, which is true, but it's a little tricky because I'm not with the local Democratic organization, right? I'm running against the local Democratic organization. And so there was a little bit of trickiness about trying to say I'm a Democrat, but I'm not one of those Democrats, but also, trying to, like, the messaging around that was a little tricky. And, I'll tell you this story real quick. So early on in running, there's a program through the Democratic Party called Run for Something, and you can apply. It's specifically for candidates under 40, and the idea is it's a program that will support it's either first or second time candidates, but it's new candidates who are younger, who are trying to sort of develop a bench for the party, right? And I had applied. There's a way they have, like, consultants that will talk with you. You have to, like, apply for I don't know if they call it a grant exactly, but it's you put yourself in, they interview you, and then if they decide you're worth investing in, they'll sit you down with a bunch of, like, advisors who will help you sort of craft a campaign and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they have all this rhetoric about, well, we're okay with going up against incumbents because the goal here is to develop a deeper bench of younger talent, right? So I'd applied for it, and I got interviewed, and I did all the stuff you're supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, somebody put together what race I was running in, and they suddenly were like, "No, we're not interested in that. Thank you." And that happened a couple of times in various contexts where people were kind of interested in what I was doing, and then they were like, "You're running in which race? Oh, no, thank you. We don't want to touch that one."
Yeah. Now, to this last issue, do you recall what Marty Quinn's position was on cash bail?
I don't know that. I mean, I can imagine what it would be, but I don't remember if he really ever took a public stance on it. Because again, it's like, if you're a sitting elected official, right? Mm-hmm. It's I think a little easier to just say, oh, that's not going to come up to vote. I'm not going to have to vote on that because I don't. I'm not involved in that. That's at the State House. But I don't know, because he didn't really run. I don't remember him running any ads or anything on that issue. And I know I was getting asked about it constantly. I was not every door, but a lot of doors I was knocking on. That was something that was really top of mind for people, in part because they had just gotten all these mailers from Darren Bailey.
Yeah. So I'm. We'll talk about this because. Marty Quinn was running as the chieftain of the machine. We'll get into what the machine means in the 13th ward. I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget it.
Yeah.
Because in some ways he was beyond. He transcended issues like cash bail.
Yeah.
And Venezuelan immigrants.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a feeling that the organization, right, that they take care of the neighborhood, and it's not really about issues, right? It's not that kind of politics. It's this very local, very service-oriented kind of way of doing government. And there are definitely issues that come up where, because as you know, if you're an elected official, you're going to vote on stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And people have opinions about that. But I think my impression is that is not the kind of messaging that he was putting out there, was not really issue oriented in quite that way. I do know his big issue at the time, and it still is to build a new police district and actually not so much a new police district. There is a National Guard armory adjacent to Midway Airport that's been vacant for a long time. And he's been pushing for several years now to open that as a Chicago police district, because the argument is that the 8th district, that this neighborhood is a part of, is, I think, geographically the largest, and by population is also the largest police district in the city of Chicago. And that's true. There's, I think, about 250,000 people. It covers several wards, the 8th district. And so there's this feeling that there should be another police district. You should sort of divide the district up, and then you'll get better response times and you'll get better service and things like that. And there's something to that idea. I think it's like the answer to the wrong question, because there's not staff to staff it, right? We don't, if you, just because you open a new building, you don't suddenly get 300 new police officers to staff it, right? And so there's other problems in policing that need to be addressed. And if we can address those and we can recruit people to then staff a new building, great, let's do that. But that was a lot of the messaging, a lot of the campaign messaging at the time was about, we're going to get a new police district. We're going to fight for this new police district. And that's still now, at this point, 4 years later, that's still kind of the main issue that he's pushing.
Yeah, and it's he uses it against Brandon Johnson, Mayor Brandon Johnson, all the time. So he didn't get the district before Mayor Brandon Johnson. He hasn't got the district since Mayor Brandon Johnson. But somehow or other, Marty Quinn has figured out. He's no dummy, Marty Quinn. I'll repeat what I said. He was the chief political operative for Michael Joseph Madigan's machine. So he's using all those talents, I got talents in quote, that he developed while being the henchman for Michael Joseph Madigan.
Well, and to be clear, he got, I think in the same election I was running in, they got a question on the ballot about, do you want a new police district? And it was like 90% of voters said yes, right? It's just overwhelmingly, right? And like I said, again, if you talk to people and you lay out the idea that like, well, we don't really have the people to staff a new building, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like on paper, if you say, would you like a new building? People say yes, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, Paul hasn't gotten into his background, but he studied political science at University of Chicago. And he's actually writing a book right now.
I should say I studied history at the University of Chicago. I did public policy at Northwestern.
I humbly sit here corrected.
That's okay.
In my mind, I turned it into the political science at the University of Chicago,
that's okay.
which kind of the same.
Yeah.
But I said it's a good this distinction. Thanks for making it. So the point is, he's well read in politics, and here's a very practical. Like he's putting it together. It's like Daniel Moynihan running for Senate in New York. Look it up, millennials. And Paul doesn't need to look it up, even though he is a millennial, because he studied political science and he knows who Daniel Moynihan is. All right. So
unfortunately, Ben, well-read and practical on a campaign sign doesn't fire people up.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll bet you Marty Quinn does not know who Daniel Moynihan is, and it doesn't matter.
Well, but he does, but yeah.
You think he knows who Daniel Moynihan is?
I think a guy like him, I think he knows his political history. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I say corrected. I know Michael Joseph Madigan knows who Daniel Moynihan is. No doubt about that. But if the baby Madigan, I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is this, is that a very important issue like eliminating cash bail happened with the support of the Democratic leadership in Springfield. And that leadership had transitioned from Madigan to Chris Welch by the time you were running for office.
Yeah.
And I don't believe, I don't know this for certain, Paul, but having followed the way Michael Madigan down through the years handled, they call themselves progressives, you can call them liberals, lefties, whatever you want to call them, their issues, leads me to conclude that we wouldn't have gotten cash bail abolished had he been the speaker, because Michael Madigan, and I'd love for your thoughts on this. Michael Madigan's chief pursuit as the Speaker of the House was to guarantee that he remained Speaker of the House. And to do that, he had to get his members reelected. And he didn't want to push issues that would force them into controversial yes or no votes. I saw this with gay marriage. I watched the way he handled gay marriage. He kept holding off while he was soaking campaign contributions from prominent supporters of gay marriage. But in addition to that, he was holding off to let the public get more into the issue so that would be safer for his members. I don't know if he ever would have thought it would be safer for his members, his caucus members, Democratic caucus members, to vote for the abolition of cash bail. And my guess is he would have just stifled it for year after year, like he stifled one way or the other in conjunction with Cullerton, an elected school board. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to say, right? Because I do think the environment. So this is right. This is post 2020, right? So there has been, by the time I'm running in 22, 23, there has been this momentum coming out of George Floyd protests for reform, and I mean, you look at the Democratic majority in Springfield now. I think if it's not at an all-time high, it's up there, right? I think there was a political moment where for a lot of races this was a political winner that I think some of why it comes up when it does. I mean, it's a product of its moment in time, right? But I also think there's a scenario where I think Mike Madigan is a very practical politician, right? And I think there are principles there, but I also think if he saw it as a winning issue for a majority, he might have been for it. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Oh yeah, if he saw it as a winning, that's exactly the point I was making.
Right,
but he probably is very cautious. So it's going to take a while for him. He's convinced that a controversial issue like that is the ticket to success.
Yeah.
And then there's really no one for him to soak.
I will say too, one of the things that's really striking to me about the Safety Act, and particularly the abolishing cash bail, is so I check up on it every once in a while to see like how's it doing, right? There's been reports out about a year on, 2 years on, what do the numbers look like? A lot of the people that I talked to who were really fired up about it in 2022, I bet don't even remember that it was an issue, right? That it passed, it was implemented, because the predictions, and this again goes back to the Darren Bailey messaging, were so apocalyptic about if we do this, criminals will be roaming the street, and it's going to be the end of enforcing the law as we know it, and that obviously that hasn't happened, right? Now, is it better? Is it worse? There's numbers have moved in positive directions in some cases and not in so positive directions in other cases. But it is, it's, you evaluate it, you do it, you evaluate it, you make changes when you need to. But I think it has been, I think the best thing you can say about it is that the implementation happened in a way that like most people probably don't remember that they were worried about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm watching Darren Bailey on this issue. I don't want to go down that path, but he went on the Laura Trump show, one of the dumbest appearances I've ever heard, even dumber than his commercial extolling the virtues of a Chicago hot dog without ketchup. And he talked about how somehow or other Pritzker is responsible for the murder of the Loyola undergrad and by a Venezuelan immigrant, a lunatic, apparently, allegedly. Remember the presumption of innocence. And I'm like, and he blamed Pritzker for that, and it was just a revival of the rhetoric for 2022 campaign, Paul. So I think there will always be a Republican Party that tries to scare people into voting against their economic interests with the fear of crime. That's my whole life, Paul. I'm an old guy. That's I go back to Nixon, and I've watched them do that. And go ahead.
And it's tricky because and this was true in 2022, and it's even more true now, right? If you go to just statistics, right, you can say, hey, numbers are down in all these categories. Chicago is safer now than it was a few years ago. I think the 2025 homicide total was the lowest since like the 60s. And if you try to say, hey, it's safer than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, and it's safer than it was. I think what was it, 2015 or 2016, we started hitting really high annual totals. Like it peaked for some reason, and but people don't feel that. And it's very hard to explain, like have a rational conversation with somebody who feels scared, right? If they're worried about something in the abstract, to try to like reason them out of that position is very, very difficult. And so trying to have conversations about like, look, at the time, I think the numbers had been going down and then had popped up again a little bit. And I was saying, obviously you want crime going down, right? Very obviously, we want people to be safe. And so we want to work on that, but let's not turn this into sort of some unprecedented crisis, right? This has been for decades, right? For as long as we have numbers on this stuff, we've been dealing with these issues. And if you try to talk about, I don't know, homicide rates rather than totals and things like that, people just kind of, everything just glazes over. Because they feel it. They feel it. Yeah.
Look at this, the recent debate, and I have the word debate in quotes, between Pope Leo and Donald Trump. Pope Leo is extolling the notion of compassion, how you deal with people. I mean, he is a priest, right? Yeah. And he is preaching the gospels of Christ, if you will. So this is the fundamental bedrock. And Trump is like saying he's weak on crime. He's soft on crime. I'm like, what? I can't even get the words out.
The thing that really struck me about the Pope Leo stuff was that in most of the statements Pope Leo made, he doesn't mention Trump or American politics in any direct way. So if you say, I think people should be more compassionate, and somebody's like offended by that statement, I feel like that says more about them than it does about the person saying, hey, we should treat people like they're people, right? And I'll be very curious to see how that whole thing plays out in an area like the southwest side of Chicago. People are very excited about the fact that the Pope is a guy from Chicago, right? And to a point you made earlier about the suburbs versus the city. I grew up in this area. People were always very careful to say we're from Chicago, right? There's suburbs nearby. That's not us. We're Chicagoans. And if somebody from the suburbs tried to say they were Chicago, we'd be like, well, where are you really from? And if they said Brookfield, we'd be like, no, that doesn't count. And the Pope gets a pass on this. I don't know if you've noticed this. The Pope was born in Chicago, but he grew up in Dalton. And everybody's like, that's cool. We're fine with it.
Yeah, no, do I notice? I talk about it all the time. I think I get great delight and pleasure pointing out, actually the Pope is from Dalton. And it's funny how that goes. Chicagoans have this elasticity on this issue. They can bend when it fits their needs.
Well, we can adopt anyone we want to. So if we decide that Barack Obama is going to be the president and we need him to be from Chicago, he's official. He counts.
Absolutely. The guy's from Hawaii, Chicagoans.
That's close enough. He lived here.
Rahm Emanuel's from Wilmette. So, all right, let's get back to the 13th word. It's fascinating what you discovered. So there's this knee-jerk reaction on the part of Republicans and independent reformers against the Chicago machine. And this could be the topic of an entire show. So maybe you and I can have this discussion because you are a student and a scholar of political science. But the Chicago machine, as it was in its heyday, no longer exists. It's just the big blow against the Chicago machine were the series of judicial rulings against patronage. So without that patronage army, there's not much of a Chicago machine, except in a handful of areas like the 13th Ward. And this is so strange. There's all this denunciation about the Chicago machine, but near as I could tell, in the 13th Ward, where Trump gets quite a few votes, just pointing this out. Okay, all right, maybe not a majority. I should look it up, but there's precincts where he gets a majority. They love themselves the machine. So
Well,
Explain the love for the machine in the 13th Ward. Go.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? And I think the biggest one is that the MO of the machine for generations has been, if somebody comes in and they say they need something, right? You get it for them.
Yeah.
Right. If they say they need a job, you try to get them a job. Right. If they say they need their grass cut, you try to get their grass cut. They need a street light. They need a handicap parking spot. They need a permit, they need whatever, right? You jump to it and you do it, right? I had a guy when I was out canvassing one day. I was out knocking doors, and the guy saw me. I don't even think he came to his house. I think he passed me on the sidewalk. And he was like, "You're the guy who's running, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You're not gonna win." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "You know why? Because elections are won by services, and we got great services here in the 13th Ward, and that's all anybody cares about, right?" And then he just kept walking. And I mean, look, I'd love to say, oh, no, there's more to it than that. And I think there is a little more to it than that. But I think for a lot of people, that is it. I needed something. I needed a garbage can. I needed my water bill put on a payment plan. I needed whatever with the city service I needed was. I called them. They helped me. The end. Right. And we talked about this a little bit the other day. One of the things that's a little bit unusual in the 13th Ward is that so that we have city services, right? You've got city crews that go out and fill up potholes and all that stuff. But the 13th Ward Democratic Organization also has its own trucks and its own staff. And they have at least one, I think there might be a couple of pickup trucks that are the service trucks, and they have at least one cherry picker. And I forget if they've purchased, there's a graffiti blaster that might technically belong to the city. I don't remember. I think that was purchased by the city through menu funds, I think is what happened. But there's a bunch of these pieces of equipment that have been purchased either with discretionary funds or with political funds. And so if you need, let's say you call to get your tree trimmed, right? You call the ward office. Now what's supposed to happen is a 311 request goes in, a city crew comes out, and they do it, right? But that can be pretty backed up. There's a wait list for that stuff. Unless it's an emergency, they may not come out right away, right? But the 13th Ward has a cherry picker, and they'll go out and they'll cut the branch off your tree like this afternoon, right? And for people who want the service and who want to see the service happening quickly, that's all they really care about, right? And so there is this sense that they provide, that the organization provides, and that's what we want them to do. And as long as they keep doing that, we're happy, right?
Yeah.
I will point out, by the way, not to go on too long here, but I think it's really interesting. I think there's a lot less ability to do, like you were talking about, patronage jobs and Shackman decrees and stuff like that. And there's, I think, a lot less ability than there used to be to get people jobs with the city, right? There's a lot more scrutiny around that. There's a lot more transparency around that. And I think that's some of why the Madigan scandal that finally broke involved ComEd, right? That it wasn't government jobs, right? It had to be this other thing, because if it had been government jobs, there would have been, all that scrutiny would have been in play.
Absolutely.
And so I think you see these organizations kind of looking for the cracks. Where can we go that we're going to avoid that scrutiny?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, again, this is a conversation at a greater length at another time. But the transition from the old daily machine, that's like what people think of when you talk about a daily machine, to the baby daily machine, Richard M. Daley, the kid that all of you guys know, not Daddy Daley, had to do with the reality that Daley had less control over city jobs than his daddy did. And so we moved to this like pinstripe patronage, doling out of contracts to legal operations, doling out of TIF dollars to downtown developers. That kept them all in line. They kept pumping money into the daily machine. They were cultists. They spread the word that we only have one mayor in this town. That's all we need. If we, God forbid, if we have anybody else other than this mayor, it's going to be chaos, council wars all over again. And so I feel, when I say this all the time, Paul, when I see Trump cultists in Wisconsin or here in Illinois lining up behind Donnie, no matter what he does. I go, oh,
Mhm.
this is just this is daily machine politics. This is the same mentality
Yeah.
that Chicago corporate community had, and you walked into it. You're this kid, pride and joy of the 13th Ward, home raised. He's
Yeah.
not from Westchester, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
He went to St. Joseph's. It's in Westchester, but a lot of kids went to Catholic school beyond the city.
Yeah.
Fenwick, Loyola, look them up.
Yeah.
So you're very much a 13th Warder, but to challenge Marty Quinn, do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is like challenging in some ways on a local level, Richard M. Daley. You
I-
got to be a little nutty to do that. Go ahead.
I will tell you. So one of the first days I was out knocking on doors, I came to the, so you ring the doorbell and they come out and you say, hi, I'm Paul Bruton. I'm running for alderman. Yeah, I'm getting signatures. And this guy looks at me and he goes, well, where's Tom? And I said, I don't know who Tom is, And he said, oh, Tom's the old precinct captain.
Oh my God.
And I said, oh, no, I'm not the precinct captain. I'm a candidate. I'm running for alderman. He goes, the guy looks at me, he goes, is Tom sick? I said, no, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what Tom's doing, but I'm not the precinct captain. But the idea that there even was somebody running, right, was like so foreign that they just couldn't. You're here with the clipboard. You must be the precinct captain. And that was that. I mean, that was a consistent challenge throughout, is trying to just like explain, I'm doing this. Was just so, I think, just really surprising to people. And in some cases, people were really positive about that, and they had a lot of respect for the attempt. And in other cases, people were like, "You're out of your mind. What are you doing?"
Yeah. No, if I lived down there, I would have been cheering you on. I go, yeah, my man, go for it. And see, particularly because you weren't coming from the right. If you were coming from the right, I probably would have voted, oh, Marty Quinn's my guy. I had that attitude. I'm looking at the clock. We got to go pretty soon. But I had that attitude, Paul, when Michael Joseph Madigan himself ran for re-election. It was a contentious race, and Rauner was encouraging people to vote for, I forget the dude's name, a Democrat running against Mad Dog in the Democratic primary. And Michael Madigan, at this stage, had earned the enmity of the entire corporate community in the city of Chicago, and the Tribune and Cranes and all those creatures, because he was standing up for unions and collective bargaining rights, as you were pointing out. And he won my respect for that. And whereas his opponent was kind of soft on that because of the Rauner's endorsement. And so I would have voted for Madigan had I lived. I would have voted for him. And I to this day, Paul, I gave him, even though I've been against him on every issue in the world, you could tell the way I talk, I give him credit. He did something that no other high-ranking Democrat did. Rahm Emanuel didn't do it. He was scared. John Culler didn't do it. He was scared. He defied Rauner and the corporate community. So, I got respect for him for that. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I will say I agree with you there. If you're looking at something and you're going issues first, right?
Yes.
The personalities matter less than what are they going to actually do, right? I will say though, one of the things I sort of understood but didn't really understand until I ran is as much as we talked about, there's less ability for the organization to get jobs and things than there used to be. There is still a perception that they're able to do that. And there is a perception that if you cross them, they will punish you.
Yes.
And I had a guy knocked on the door, and the guy came out, and I explained who I was, and he said, oh no, I'm not interested in any of that. He closed the door. So I started walking away, and he comes out again and he said, hey, I just want you to understand, I work for the city. I got 2 years till retirement. I don't want any trouble. Right. You understand? Like, I just don't want to be. And I said, no, I understand. I said, but isn't it kind of a problem that you're worried about that, right? Like, shouldn't you be able to sign any petition? And shouldn't you be able to vote however you want? And shouldn't you be able to? And there is, that story played out again and again where people are legitimately afraid. And I think there's reason for that, right? But I also think that is a vestige of a time when these organizations could do more to make your life difficult. And I think they don't have as much power as they used to, but they are happy to promote the idea that they do.
Yes.
Because as long as you think they can do it, you're not willing to take that chance, right? And I heard some version of, I've got 3 years till retirement, I've got 2 years till retirement, more than once, where people were like, I don't want to sign anything, I don't want any trouble, they're going to come knocking on my door if they see my name on there, I don't want that. So it is you know, and I think this is, I've said before, you'll hear people occasionally talk about Brandon Johnson and the teachers union is like a new machine, right? And I don't agree with that. I think it misunderstands what the machine is. And I think just because something's a political organization doesn't make it a machine, right? That there's an element of coercion and there's an element of using official action to further political ends that makes something a political machine. And so I think we do still have, as much as you're right, the daily machine, the big citywide daily machine is gone. There are still elements of it that are out there. And I think it's not impossible that somebody could step into the mayor's office next year who pulls some of those elements back together. That's absolutely. They're out there, and they're if somebody can rally them together, that it's not quite as dead and buried as some people want to say.
Agreed, 100%, well stated. And you'll see a new Marty Quinn when that happens, ladies and gentlemen. He'll be standing up. I just want to say that Mayor Giannoulias is an outstanding mayor. And every day I wake up and go, Mayor Giannoulias, I love you. You'll see a new Marty, and Ray Lowe, his sidekick from the 15th ward. I love Mayor Giannoulias, and Anthony Beale. What a great, well, you watch it, ladies and gentlemen. You'll see, you go, Paul predicted it. Yeah. All right, Paul, we've run out of time.
Okay.
And we didn't even get into the book you're writing, which is a fascinating book. I'm going to have to bring you back for that.
Okay.
And it's a book about the Midway Homes riots.
Airport Homes.
My bad. Yeah.
That's okay.
Airport Home, and I was thinking Midway Airport.
You're right.
And it's just fascinating history and account that's kind of overlooked. So we'll bring it back to discuss that. Am I allowed? Are you allowed to talk about it, even though it's?
Yeah, I am allowed to talk about it. Yeah. You want me to say a few words about it real quick?
Yeah, close it down by saying a few words.
So I'm currently kind of stumbled into a topic in the last year or two, and I started working on some research and happened to start developing a book about something called the Airport Homes riots, which again, 13th Ward, happened in the 13th Ward, 1946, 1947. There was a CHA post-war veterans housing project, and it was these repurposed wartime war worker housing that they moved to Chicago because as people returned from World War II, there wasn't enough housing to go around. And so CHA tried to, through a federal program, tried to solve that. And as part of that, CHA's staff decided that that was a moment to try to discard a policy they had of racial segregation. And so they try to integrate this project and it doesn't go well. The neighbors riot, and there's a lot of violence, and it is a sort of really critical political moment. It's the very end of Ed Kelly's time as mayor, and this event contributes to his exit as mayor. And I think I'm sort of diving into it still a little bit, but I think sets the stage for a couple years later. The first Mayor Daley is going to step on the scene, and I think it's all tied up in that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the CHA went in a whole different direction with high-rise ghettos and the policies of stuffing Black people into just little pockets, if you will, to prevent integration. Fascinating history of Chicago that very rarely gets discussed because people are ashamed of it and embarrassed about it.
Yeah, well, and to your point, Arnold Hirsch, Making the Second Ghetto, is currently the best account. He sort of does a wider overview of like a 20-year span. I'm really trying to drill into the specifics of this one event and who was there and what it involved. And it's an amazing who's who of people who descended on West Lawn, which is the neighborhood just to the east of Midway Airport. And it was the 13th Ward then, it's the 13th Ward now. It's all part of the same story.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Paul, thank you very much for coming on the show. And I want to give a shout out to Tristan
Oh, yes.
for my Monday Night Bowling lead. He's the reason I know about Paul. So, Tristan, well done. Thank you for the connection. In Chicago, everything's a connection. It's somebody I met at my bowling night
Yep.
who said, hey, I know someone you should know. So thank you very much.
Well, and Tristan and I were at high school together at St. Joe's in Westchester, which is how I know him. And
Yes.
he when he told me he was going to connect me to you, I was like, this is a joke. He's joking about this. But no, it was real.
Yeah, it was real. And last night, Tristan bowled for the big pot, but we're not going to talk about what he did. And love you, Tristan, very much. All right, Paul, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great talking to you. I also want to thank producer Chris. He does an outstanding job, and I know Paul and Tristan agree when I say, hey, producer Chris, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody.
Remember, you can download episodes of The Ben Joravsky Show wherever you download podcasts. Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. Subscribe. Give us a review. But remember the rule, 5 stars only. Go find The Ben Joravsky Show wherever you download podcasts. But also get this, Ben actually bought a website, and it's actually pretty awesome. It's thebenjoravskyshow.com. Go find it right now, bookmark it immediately, because not only can you find previous Ben Joravsky Show episodes, thebenjoravskyshow.com is also the new home for Ben Joravsky columns. You may have noticed something's missing in your Chicago Reader these days. Where'd the Ben Joravsky columns go? They're over at thebenjoravskyshow.com. Go read his latest column. He's been posting his columns at thebenjoravskyshow.com for a while now. So after you read the latest column, go check out the rest. There's tons more on the site. There's also the Benny J Book Club. What's that, you ask? It's a book club. Ben talks about the latest books he read. Was it a good book? Was it a bad book? Find out at thebenjoravskyshow.com. And finally, The Ben Joravsky Show is now an independently funded podcast. That's right, Ben's footing the bill. We love what we do, and we want to keep bringing you content like this. We'd be flattered even if you consider donating to The Ben Joravsky Show. This operation now runs off the hard work of independent podcast producers who kindly give their time to keep this operation going. We'd greatly appreciate your support. Again, it's thebenjoravskyshow.com. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. Read the columns, join the book club, and find The Ben Joravsky Show and subscribe wherever you download podcasts.